Okay, good morning, everyone. We're just waiting as everyone's joining, and we'll start shortly. Great, I think we'll kick off. So thanks everyone for joining us this morning or this evening. Really excited that we're hosting this webinar today together with the National Graduate Institute for Policy Studies in Tokyo. And thank you also to our partners in ILC Japan who made this connection happen this summer. When I was in Tokyo and I got to visit the Institute and start the conversation about how we could maybe do something that helps us learn a little bit from both the UK's and Japan's approach to healthy aging. So very excited. We've got a great panel with us today. The context is, of course, Japan is the only super aging nation in the world. At the same time, a comparatively healthy country. And so lots of lessons to learn. Similarly, lots of things that are going on in the UK. So joint challenges and opportunities, I think, but I hope we'll all go away learning something new around healthy aging. We are going to be hearing, as I said, from both countries in terms of some of the policy areas that have been explored. And then my colleague Aaron will also be sharing some of our preliminary findings from our Healthy Aging and Prevention Index, which I'll let her introduce, but is a really useful tool that we hope to be sort of expanding over the next few months to give us an insight in terms of how countries are doing on the healthy aging front and what might work well. So a big thanks again to GRIPS for joining us for this webinar. Thank you also to Hallmark Foundation, Pfizer, Sanofi, GSK, MSD and Amgen who are supporting the work on our index. A few really quick housekeeping rules. So we'll be using the Q&A function that you should see at the bottom of your screen to collect questions. So put them in as we're going along and I'll be kind of grouping them and asking them to panelists. If you have any questions in terms of sort of more the logistical side of things, put those in the chat, or if you want to introduce yourself and share where you're coming from. Also feel free to use Twitter. So the hashtag we're using for this webinar is Delivering Prevention. And just so you're aware, we will be recording the webinar and publishing it on YouTube following the session. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce Dr. Taichi Ono from GRIPS. Dr. Ono received a PhD in economics from Osaka City University and has since held a number of different positions at the Ministry of Health and Welfare and now the Ministry of Health, Labour and Welfare in Japan. Including various director-level positions at the Health Policy Bureau, the Health Services Bureau, and Equal Employment, Children and Family Welfare Bureau. He's also been the first secretary at the Embassy of Japan in the United States and director for long-term care insurance in Hyogo Prefectural Government. He's been a tenured professor at National Graduate Institute for Policy Studies, GRIPS, since April 2020, and his specialty is in social security policy, healthcare and long-term care policy. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Ono, to share a little bit on active aging in Japan from a historic perspective.
Okay, thank you very much, Lily, Arun, and Dr. Judith, and my friends and colleagues at ILC-UK for holding this quite interesting seminar for us. I'm Taichi Ono, National Graduate Institute for Policy Studies, Tokyo. So I will talk about the active aging in Japan from historic perspective, which are kind of my specialty for the research. Yes, so let me go to the next slide. Let's see how. Okay, there you go. Okay, this is the obviously the proportion of the aging. I mean the on the. Let me go one slide back. Oops. Is that working? Okay, how can I? Let's see. I'm sorry. Okay, now okay. Okay, oops. Sorry. I'm still not used to. Okay, there you go. I'm sorry for taking time. On the left-hand side, you see the population 65 plus as of total population, comparing Japan and the United Kingdom. On right-hand side, you can see the 75 plus share. As you can see, United Kingdom is a much younger country than us. But what I want to stress here is the speed of aging has been so rapid in our country, Japan, compared to UK. That tendency is the same compared with other G7 countries. Going to next slide. This is a population pyramid. Left-hand side, you can see the United Kingdom, right-hand side, Japan. Each of the left-hand side male and right-hand side is female. On the top side is the 100 plus age, and bottom side is 0 to 4. You can see the both countries' graphs is not like a pyramid, rather than it looks like the ship or a boat. But I tried to overlap it. You can see the obvious difference of the shape of that boat. In Japan's case, we are a little bit fat on the upper side, i.e. the aging bracket, like the 70s and 80s, and slim for the younger generation, bottom 30s. Next slide is comparing kind of same thing, comparing London to Tokyo, the structure of the age. On the right, in the horizontal side, you see the age, and the vertical side, you see the total absolute number. As you can see, in both cities, it attracts the younger generation, and around 20 or 25, many younger generation will move or flock to the cosmopolitan areas. But you can see the difference like this. In our case, we are a little bit skewed to the right, i.e. the elder generation, compared to the composition in London. So it's kind of interesting to see this kind of difference. And when you visit each other's country, you might look around and see the faces of the people on the street. Okay, next slide, showing that on the red line is the GDP nominal in Japan, and the black line is the dependency ratio, percentage of population, 65 plus under 15 as of the 16 to 64. You can see on the left-hand side, the because of the population, so-called population bonus, we have experienced rapid economic growth in 1960s and 70s and 80s. But economic growth has kind of flattened since 1990s. The dependency ratio has remained in a flat about 30 or 40 years between the 1980s to until 1970s around 2000. Then it happens by offsetting the decrease of the younger generation by the increase of the elderly generation. But since around 2000, that offset does not work. Elderly populations increase hugely surpasses that of the decrease of the younger generation. And this is the age of the baby boomers. Our first baby boomers were born in 1947 to 1949 in Japan. Their young age was the kind of golden era of the Japanese economy. And they have experienced a dramatic change in the economic terms, as well as the social terms, including the composition of the family, which is I will explain next slide. This is a typical three generation household. It used to be a normal in Japan, but due to the urbanization of the lifestyle changes, people come to live separately and form a nuclear family. It used to be a social norm in Japan that the married couple will have two children, and the husband will be the sole breadwinner of that household. And this is the age of the baby boomers. They have formed this kind of family, but their structure, kind of in their mind, if remains of the kind of a filial piety. I see the taking care of the elderly parents remains in their heart. This is their sons and daughters of the baby boomers. They get married and have fewer number of children. And now it is a normal that both the husband and wife works. And the retired, baby boomers live either by the couple or, many cases, women will be passed away by their significant others. Most of the elderly lives a good life, a good and peaceful life like this picture, but some may feel the kind of the loneliness or the issue of solitude or the death by alone, since these kind of things might happen. Therefore, the importance of active aging is now the core of the debate in Japan. Next slide. This is the exception, the white paper on health and welfare. What lies ahead of us is not only the issue related to material wealth, money, or service provision, but also the spiritual matters, how we let our elderly people live fulfilled life. This is the exception from the white paper about a half century ago, 1970. Similar kind of message has been issued by the prominent social policy researcher at that time. Actually, this statement is made in, again, the half a century ago. So we are quite concerned about the kind of spiritual or the social participation aspect of the elderly. But for the policy-wise, we have to prioritize the so-called material wealth, achieving the public pension and the universal coverage of public pension and social insurance. Then in 1960s, elderly was the kind of a target of the welfare measures. Because they are the target of the welfare measures, their healthcare has been, has become free in 1973, but it led to the unwelcome consequence of this so-called issue of social hospitalization. I mean, the too much use of the hospital bed. To, overcome such situation, government has invested so much to the enrichment of the welfare for the elderly care facilities or the in-home services in 1980s and 1990s. And this investment has led to the led to the introduction of the public long-term care insurance system in 2000. By the way, the last page of my slide shows the brief comparison of the social care system between the United Kingdom and Japan. So if you're interested, please take a look at it later. This public long-term insurance scheme provides these type of services. You can imagine quite easily. I mean, it's not so different from what is provided in the similar facilities in the UK. But this public long-term care insurance scheme also subsidizes various types of community, so what is called as community support project, designed and operated by the municipality government. By this subsidy mechanism, establishment of community-wide network of mutual help support for supporting daily life is aggressively promoted by the municipality government. I think the Matsuoka senseis will give us a good example, good practices of the various neighborhoods of Japan later. This is a kind of manga picture drawn by the Ministry of Health showing this community support project image. And you can see various types of the neighborhood services are supposed to be provided under this project, and various groups of people or the bodies are getting involved for their service provision. What is expected is that the elderly themselves will be the providers of these services, as participation would keep them active and prevent loneliness and loss of where to live, and thus lead to the prevention of care need and keep their psychological health. Now, we are expecting the era of the 100 years life period. This is a press release made in September 2022 by the Ministry of Health, Labour and Welfare, stating that over 45,000 elderly will receive the Centenarian Award 2022. Now there are over 90,000 people aged 100 and over nationwide. I think we have the issues related to the aging, but basically, this is something we should celebrate. Final slide of my presentation. Actually, throughout the development of social policy in Japan, Japan has learned and is learning a lot from the United Kingdom. When you use the memos in 1940s and 50s, we have learned from you by these reports, the practice national health service in the social work. When we use word processors in 1980s or 1990s, we have learned from you about the concept of community care reform, normalization of care management. Then, time of the internet, we are now learning from you these kind of practices. And now we are, kind of experimentally doing kind of similar policies like yourself, like you. So the kind of conclusion is the aging is a challenge of any humanity, yet aging is also the achievement by the humanity and is providing further opportunity to the humanity, I think. So it's exciting that the UK and Japan could disseminate positive messages toward the aging in various occasions to the global society that included not only the already aged economically advanced countries, but also the young advancing countries. So I'd like to conclude my presentation. Thank you very much. And
thank you. Really, really interesting. I'm sure we'll delve into a little bit more. There's already one question in here, but do keep them coming. And I really like the sort of the last slide you finished on. I think the one, yes, there's lots of opportunities to learn. And for us, I think a really strong message is actually how we can kind of create these opportunities in that space that, the fact that we're living longer should be quite a good thing. And if we can get it right, that stays like that. So I will pass straight over to Professor Yoko Matsuoka from Tokyo Kasei University to tell us a little bit about some sort of active aging initiatives on the ground. So Professor Matsuoka is a professor of social welfare at Tokyo Kasei University. Her works have been focusing specifically on aging in place from the viewpoint of care, housing and community building, mainly in Denmark, the Netherlands and Japan. She's published 4 books on that theme in Japanese so far, and one of those books got the award of Academy of Housing for Life and Wellbeing. And she's particularly interested in the concept of asset-based approach and co-production. So thank you so much for joining us, and over to you. I think you're on mute still.
Can you see this, my slide? It's okay? Yeah. Okay, so I'll start. Hello, everyone. I'm Yoko Matsuoka of Tokyo Kasei University, and I'm very happy to be here and to present on the active aging initiative in Japan. And following the Ono Sensei, I'd like to focus on the community support project, and I want to call it the CP project in short. And I focusing on the 3 examples in Japan, the quite high aging rate municipality. How can I go ahead slide?
I think if you just press any key, yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. The first is Ikiracho. The population is only 6,800, and the aging rate is 44%. It's the same as the 2050 or 2060 in Japan. The municipality faced the crisis that the elderly over 65 years rate will exceed the young generation's rate by 2025, and the long-term care insurance payment have been skyrocketing so fast that the municipality was convinced that it could not keep people's health and well-being only with long-term care insurance. So the Ikedacho established 3 pillars, consist of their 3 pillars is like this. One is the salons for social participation, and the second is the daily life support and transportation support. In this small municipality, there is 53 salons and 13,000 elderly people participate. This salon, such as step exercise and the margin salon and blow gun salons and recycle salons and calculating salons and news reading salons. And in daily life support, in all these projects, the young old help older old. So that means the 70 helps 80s and 90s in this project. And consequently, the remarkable outcome, that is a 48% reduction of long-term care insurance payment and a 36% reduction of users of long-term care insurance during 4 years. And the second is Hagi City in Yamaguchi Prefecture, next to Hiroshima Prefecture, where G7 will be held this May. In this municipality, their crisis for the primary schools and middle schools have been closed due to the decrease in the birth rate in the past 10 years. And the municipality started a CS project with the slogan, let's promote the community building or development through CS project. And they held more than 200 times community meetings during 3 years. And let's focus on the very little village named Mutsumi. Here is there only 1,400 inhabitants here, and the aging rate is 55%. There is 3 salons was born after 2015 in this district, and 50 volunteers in mainly 70s support daily life support, such as a light bulb replacement, petroleum refueling, and shopping support and transportation support as well. In this municipality, also the 70s help 80s and 90s. The next is the last one from the Hof City in Yamaguchi Prefecture, next to Hiroshima Prefecture as well. In this municipality, the problem was the high premium of long-term care insurance and the highest usage rate of the day services in all over Japan. But this did not lead to users' improvement, but made a change for the worse and worse and worse. And the officer in the municipality started to visit into the community and start to talk with the community members in a small island at first about what they are suffering from. And he found the problem is the shopping difficulties. So he suggests the community members the integrated project of prevention and shopping support. This project is like this. In the morning, 10 o'clock, the pickup bus from Social Welfare Corporation comes into the island and they go to their prevention exercise. The big shopping center, Ion, provide the place of the prevention, and the participants enjoyed the lunch and the shopping in Ion, this big shopping center, and go back to the home. Community members call the older in the island, why don't you attend this project? And they call the members and watch over all this process. And this island is very small, but this project prevailed into the whole city, and now the 15 project is held by 2020. The community members with some willing to do better saw the other areas success of the project, started new project in their own community with the help from the municipality. And here is in the whole city, they have a very remarkable outcome of re-enablement as well. But today I don't have enough time to explain it. So the next is the elements of the successful initiative. The first is they recognize the desperate demographic situation and the ineffectiveness of long-term care insurance services, but they didn't hide it, but disclosed this to the citizens to make them understand the severe condition and the real meaning of CS project as community development and volunteer work and their health. The person that promote all this project was the passionate officer in the municipality, and he worked with the community members so faithful attitude that the members are not the object to be helped, but the subject of their own well-being. So that it means the 70s help 80s and 90s. We can see their full participation in the community. Officers in the public and the care providers and the profitable firms like Aeon, a big shopping center, and the commissioned volunteers and neighbors association, elder associations, all together they collaborated. This is my conclusion. This is the ladder of participation from the Sherry Einstein, and shows how participation or co-production relate to the other forms of engagement in public services. In all stories I introduced here is older persons are taking and enjoying actions as the subject of the society. They participate equally with the officers in public sector and the professionals. This is the stage of doing with, and the participation led to active aging and well-being and prevention from frailty, loneliness, and loss of a will to live well. That's all. Thank you very much for your listening and attention. Thank you very much.
And thank you to you, Professor Matsuoka. Very, very interesting. And I think clearly key points around co-production and design that I'm sure we'll come back to. And I would argue that probably in terms of long-term or social care, in some ways, there are probably more issues in the UK, but again, we might come to that. I'd love to pass on to Aaron Himawan next, who is the Senior Health Research Lead here at ILC-UK. Aaron leads on ILC's Global Health Programme of work and is currently managing our Healthy Aging and Prevention Programme that she'll talk about. She has also led on a number of other health projects ranging from medication adherence to structural heart disease and adult immunisation. She is a member of the Structural Heart Disease Coalition and the ILC Global Alliance Gender and Aging Committee. Over to you, Aaron.
Thank you for that introduction, and really great to see everyone. Well, not really see you, but great to have so many of you on the call today. As Lily said, I'm going to be presenting on our Healthy Aging and Prevention Index. But before I actually get to some of the findings, I thought I'd spend a couple minutes just explaining how we sort of got to creating this index, because for those of you who don't know, we've actually been working on this global prevention program for a few years now. We sort of started in 2019 with essentially making the case, the health and economic case for investing in preventative health. And there's a very strong case for that. And as you can see, we published quite a bit on that topic. And it was quite positive reception from the stakeholders that we engaged with. I think everyone really agreed with the fact that prevention is, it's important that governments invest in prevention, particularly given our aging societies. However, what we realized was while there's a good case, it's not necessarily quite clear how countries actually invest in prevention. So how do we actually reorient our healthcare systems towards preventative health? So we moved on to sort of demonstrating how countries can do that with many stakeholders, as you can see some of them here, on how governments can really invest in preventative health. And we focused on 3 areas. One is inspiring and engaging. So how do we inspire governments, healthcare systems, and healthcare professionals, and individuals themselves who play an important role in their own health, to improve the health of individuals. We looked at how we can tackle inequalities in health. This was a huge area for us. How can we ensure that there's equitable access to the healthcare services for individuals, particularly those from marginalized and underserved populations who often are the ones most in need of these health services. And we also looked at the role of technology, which sort of undercut the first 2 themes as well. But how can we do to inspire individuals to take control of their health? How can we use it to reduce inequalities in health? And generally, how can we do it? How can we use technology to get people excited about their health? So there was lots of really interesting findings there, and you can always go to our website to check out our publications on that. But I think what was quite clear from our project so far was that there is still a huge economic benefit to investing in prevention. And you can see here that yearly productivity loss for those aged 50 to 64 is $1.02 trillion across the G20. We're talking about huge sums of money that's being lost from not investing in prevention, and you can see the breakdown sort of on the right on those images. But what we know is that, you know, across the OECD, for instance, countries are only spending 2.8% of their health budgets on prevention. We're not talking about countries investing loads in preventative health, because what we've actually found is that even increasing preventative health spend by just 0.1 percentage points could actually unlock an additional 9% of spending every year by people aged 60 or over. So even small increases can make a huge difference. But we are calling for G20 governments to increase their preventative health spend to 6%, which is what Canada currently spends and is leading, at least across the OECD, in prevention. And we've done a bit of research on this as well to demonstrate the health benefits to its population as a result of increasing its preventative spend. So I think because there's still a lot of work for us to do, our idea of developing an index is really to hold governments to account. The index, it's global, and it's like I said, really aimed at holding governments to account on healthy aging and prevention. The index measures and ranks 121 countries on 6 healthy aging indicators, including lifespan, health span, work span, income, the environment, and happiness. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about these specific metrics. But for the first time, this index really brings together sort of health, wealth, and societal metrics to give us this comprehensive picture of how sustainable countries are in the context of longer lives, and the extent to which governments are investing in efforts to prevent ill health. Aside from ranking individual countries on their performance, the index also ranks political and economic country blocks, such as G20, EU, OECD, and it's just another way for us to call governments to invest in prevention. And what we can also do with the index is we can compare it with various issues that matter to society and matter to world leaders. So, for instance, we can compare the index with how much countries invest in prevention. We can compare it against the non-communicable disease burden to see, you know, is it that countries that invest more in, let's say, preventative health, do they perform better on the index? Do countries that have a lower non-communicable disease burden perform better on the index? So it really helps us give a clear picture as to what works and what countries can do to improve their ranking. So this is a bit of a breakdown of the various indicators that are included in the measures. So first is health and lifespan, and these are quite simply measured at birth using life expectancy and healthy life expectancy measures. This is expressed in years, and this data is obtained from the WHO. Work span is defined as the number of years spent between being economically active and retirement. So that's between the ages of 15 to 65. And we essentially translate those years, that metric is expressed in a percentage, and we translate that into a number of years. So, for instance, if 100% of the population is working between 15 to 65, that's equivalent to 50 years, the 100% that population is working. So what's quite interesting about that is it's just another way of us really understanding the relationship between health, lifespan, and also work span. Income is measured by GDP per capita, and we use purchasing power parity with data obtained from the World Bank. Environment is measured using the Yale Performance Index, which positions countries on a scale of 0 to 100. 100 is best. The top 5 countries on the EPI scale are Denmark, Luxembourg, Switzerland, the UK, and France, and the average across countries is 48.8. Happiness is also another index that we've taken from the UN, and this positions countries on a scale of 0 to 10. 0 to 4 are interpreted as suffering, 5 to 7 struggling, and 8 to 10 thriving. Data is taken from the Gallup World Poll, and essentially asked respondents to think of a ladder and asked to rate their own current lives on that 0 to 10 scale. So I'm going to go into a little bit of detail as to how we actually develop the final ranking numbers. So what we initially start with is we categorize countries from best to worst, on each individual indicator. And you can see that in the little table below the second column, step 1, we essentially just rank them. So country Y and country X are actually the 2 best performing countries on the index. So you can quite clearly see here, 83.4 is a higher lifespan than 82.3, so it's ranked higher on the index, or in that column. Once each country is categorized on 6 indicators, we then assign these indicators a numerical value. So here you can see their numerical value being 2 and 14. Obviously, as 2 leading countries, that doesn't seem quite right, but that's because for this metric on its own, they don't rank at the top for lifespan. But when we take all the different indicators together, they actually do end up performing at the top of the index. So once we do that for lifespan, we do that for all the other indicators. And as you can see here, we've ranked them across health span, work span, income, environment, and happiness. And once we've done that, we take the sum of all these ranks for each country to generate another country score. So you can see that here, 41 and 65 is the sum of the ranks of all the different metrics. And then once we do that, we assign them their final rank. The smaller the score, the higher the rank. So country Y has the smallest at 41, so it's ranked number 1. Country X has the second smallest at 65, and it's ranked in 2nd place. So this is the index, the top 25 performing countries, and as you can see, Switzerland leads the way at number 1. What's quite interesting about this is actually the top performing countries are have relatively small populations. So that's really interesting to kind of see that. Those that are in bold are countries that belong to the G20. A country that has the same value and rank, or the same value, are also ranked the same. So for instance, you can see Australia and Singapore are ranked at 6. And the 2 arrows essentially just demarcate where Japan and the UK sit. As you can see, Japan does slightly better than the UK on the rank, and they're ranked jointly with Germany at 16. This is another breakdown looking at G20 countries. As you can see here, I'm going to focus sort of on Japan and the UK in a moment, but Australia does lead across the G20, and India is trailing at the bottom. When you look at the specific indicators or values for the different metrics, what we can actually see is despite Japan performing better than the UK, there's a few areas in which the UK is leading. So income, environment, and happiness. However, lifespan and health span, Japan does do quite significantly better than the UK. But what's quite interesting again is that it varies for every country in terms of how well they do for each metric. So in some, they can perform particularly better than in others. But it does give us a little bit more I guess, a closer look at what's actually going on in that country. What we've done here is we've essentially done the same thing, but across economic and political blocks of interest. So we have several here. OECD, which Japan and the UK are both a member of, and of course the G20 perform sort of third, and then towards the bottom is the G20, which is quite understandable given there's quite a diverse group of countries that are members of that. But again, what's quite interesting here is that we can see that, you know, Scandinavia, which is probably unsurprisingly at number 1, and G7 at number 2, it's interesting to see how different or how varied the various outcomes are for various different metrics. In the EU in particular, when it comes to work span, you can see it's doing particularly poorly compared to the other economic and political blocs. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the metrics themselves. So they do relate to one another, which is, again, I think understandable. When we look, for instance, at environment and income, we can see that there's a relationship between the two. What we've essentially done here is each of the groupings represent the different ranks. So we have Group 1 represents those that have performed between the 1st and the 9th rank, and second between the 10th and the 19th rank. Japan and the UK obviously are falling in the second grouping of countries. So essentially what you can see here is that there is a relationship between the two. So investing in better environmental practices can potentially have an impact on people's income. And the same sort of relationship is present for happiness and income, although slightly less prominent. And I think it's worth mentioning here that happiness is the only metric where we're actually asking people their perception on their own happiness. So there is a bit of variation, we imagine, in terms of how people actually define happiness. And there's probably going to be cultural differences there that are that we can see in terms of where countries rank. So there will be a little bit of variation here, but there's nonetheless still a relationship between the two. So I'm just going to finally end my presentation with just a few final points. So we're going to be launching this index, which will be essentially an online tool that people can use alongside the World Health Assembly in May this year. And this is really, we really want to be engaging with as many people as we can, as many world leaders as we can, on the sort of on getting them to act on prevention. And so we'll be engaging with the G7 in Japan, and we'll also be engaging at the G20 in India this year as well, alongside many other conferences also. And alongside the index as well, we're building a coalition, a healthy aging and prevention coalition, which is essentially going to be demanding action and holding governments to account on preventative health. And we're really keen to, it's really just a call to everyone here today. If anyone's interested in joining the coalition, to please get in touch with myself, and I believe we'll put some details in the chat so that you can reach out. It will be great to hear from as many of you, and we really want to get sort of a diverse group of stakeholders to really be able to demonstrate that lots of people actually agree on prevention, and we think it's a good thing, and it's time for governments to start investing in it.
Thank you, Aaron. And I can see there's a few questions that have come in already specifically on the index that we might not get a chance to cover all of them. So Aaron, actually, if you do want to answer any of them directly or afterwards by email. And finally, I'd love to pass on to Professor Judith Phillips, who's going to share a few different initiatives in the UK in terms of healthy aging. We're currently working with Judith on a really interesting project as well, looking at how retailers can support healthy aging. So Judith is Deputy Principal for Research and Professor of Gerontology at the University of Stirling, and is the UKRI Research Director for the Healthy Aging Challenge. Before joining the university, Judith was Director of the Research Institute for Applied Social Sciences at Swansea University, She was also director of the Centre for Ageing and Dementia Research for Wales and the School for Social Care Research in Wales. And between 2008 and 2010, Judith was president of the British Society of Gerontology and was awarded an OBE for services to older people in 2013. So thanks so much for joining us, Judith. I'd love to pass over to you.
Thank you very much, Lily, and thank you for that introduction. And thank you to my co-presenters for some very insightful and fascinating detail about policy and practice in Japan and obviously globally with the index. So thank you for that. It's really interesting. I'm going to talk about the Healthy Aging Challenge. And Aaron, if I could have the first slide, that would be great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so the Healthy Aging Challenge in the UK was launched in 2019, and it's a government initiative which is investing in a programme of UK-wide innovation and research. And the focus here for the whole challenge is to bring business into the ageing market and to develop the ageing market for older people. And again, like we've been talking about, the emphasis on prevention, on developing products and services for older people to enable them and to support them to live independently. So the vision for the challenge was to enable businesses, including social enterprises, to develop and deliver products, services and business models that could be adopted at scale. And I think the important thing here is adopted at scale, because there are lots of initiatives across the UK which are small scale, developed by small businesses that don't really scale up. And of course, this feeds into the whole of the industrial strategy that was so important in the UK when this was set up. And the aim is to enable people to remain active and productive for as long as possible and socially connected across generations. So I think we can see some synergies here in the policy intent between the UK and Japan, particularly in terms of that connection across generations. And the investment aligned to 7 themes of healthy aging, which you can see in the diagram there, which paints a holistic picture of what makes healthy later life. So looking at living well with cognitive impairment, supporting social connections, looking at aging environments as well. And so all the initiatives are around one or more of these particular themes. If I could have the next slide, Aaron, that would be great. So what's happened since 2019? Well, there's been a huge investment from government and from our partners in the private sector, in public sector and from the charity sector. It's a £98 million initiative. We have now more than 121 projects. This slide is slightly out of date. We have over 130 projects, £46 million invested from industry. We've got more than 40 universities engaged, and we've got investor partners as well. And also a research director, which happens to be me. So if we could have the next slide, and you can find our story so far on our website, which will be available at the end of this presentation. So what does this investment actually support? Well, it spans multiple industries, multiple sectors, and academic disciplines, and ranges from providing funding for small catalyst awards right the way up to multi-million-pound investment in trailblazers. So it starts with helping entrepreneurial researchers who want to develop spin-outs, particularly from the arts and humanities and social sciences. So this is not focusing on the medical or the biomedical life sciences. It's really focusing on social science and making that at the heart of these initiatives. So small scale SMEs can apply for funding, right the way up to the Trailblazers, which are initiatives that are much closer to the market and ready to scale up. And we have some very big players in this particular section. And then between, we have a number of competitions looking at supporting businesses that design for aging, particularly using user-centered design. And co-production runs through all of the things that we do, but particularly in relation to this design aspect. And then wrapping around these investments are a community of practice, which brings together all the initiatives, all the researchers, all the businesses to learn from each other. And we have regular meetings on any particular topic of use to the businesses and to researchers. We also link in with wider initiatives across the UK. So the research centres that are operating in the UK, the National Innovation Centre for Ageing at Newcastle in particular. So there's a huge community that contribute to this initiative as well, and provide that peer-to-peer support for all of the investment. And then we have the research programme, which I lead, which really focuses on the social, behavioural and design research aspects, with the focus to support business to improve their impact, particularly impact with older people. And so the research stream, if we could have the next slide, Aaron, thank you. The research stream has 12 major projects in it, and it demonstrates, I think, the role that social sciences and arts and humanities plays in the ecosystem of ageing. And I've just put 3 projects down here, and please do go onto our website and have a look at some others. But I want to highlight these 3 because they all feature cognitive health. And I think one of the things that struck me in terms of looking at the investments across the piece, there's a huge investment going into improving and looking at cognitive health across the piece. So, you know, I think this is one of the key things. Although we are aging, both Japan and the UK, it's not so much the demographics that are the issue, but aging healthily is the issue, and particularly aging well in terms of our cognitive health. And so we've funded these particular projects. The Enliven project, for example, is looking at promoting active leisure for healthy later life. And it's looking at making outdoor activity accessible for people living with dementia. And so this is engaging with the tourist industry, or what we call the visitor economy. And it's working with businesses up and down the UK, although it's led from Exeter University. So working with Kew Gardens, for example, on looking at what they can do, not necessarily, but not just in terms of the physical environment, but also in terms of the sensory stimulation, the relationship between customers and people who work in business. So very interesting outdoor project there. And the space project, which is quite different, is looking at things like how air pollution affects cognitive health, and really looking at how we should layer our data in relation to environments to find out what is contributing to cognitive health. And then the DESHA project, which is designing homes for healthy cognitive aging. And this is a project based at Stirling University in Scotland, and it's co-producing this research, particularly with older people and businesses. We have leading to a demonstration of a house. We're using virtual reality and looking at demonstration of a house which will be located in the community. So we're testing out different models in terms of how we design homes for cognitive aging. The PI the DESHA project, Alison Bowes, I think, is on the call today. So if there are any questions about that, perhaps we'll get Alison to address those. Now, DESHA has been working with the building and construction industry, so looking at that sector and looking at impact in that sector in relation to healthy aging. And I'm using this example because it's running parallel to a piece of work that the researchers did with Japan. And we've been working with Japan on a number of projects, but particularly looking at people living with dementia and looking at the environmental aspects. So if I could have the next slide, Aaron, this will show this particular project, which again was headed up by Alison Bowes. And we were looking at why Scotland in the UK should partner with Japan to look at design and cognitive aging. And we've set up a network, mainly because we share challenges with increasing numbers of people living with dementia. And we've heard some of that demographic comparison today. But we also have a shared policy focus. So there's lots of things that both our governments are engaged in that are very parallel. There are some differences. For example, in relation to our strategy and policy around carers, particularly family carers, we've got quite different perceptions, policy around that. But there's quite a lot that we are doing together. And we all are looking at making the environment better for people with dementia to stay at home for as long as possible. And so there's a whole policy framework around that. And the network consists of a number of Japanese universities. If I can have the next slide, thank you. So you'll see here the list of people who started this network and have been working with the generous funding from the Economic and Social Research Council, part of UKRI, in developing this. So looking at approaches to researching the socio-economic, the cultural, the environment and policy influences which impact on design for living better with dementia. And we've been having visits to each country and really teasing out some of those relationships then around aging. And there are publications available as well from this piece of work. So what are we learning from policymakers from this work? Where is this leading us in policy terms? And if I could have the next slide, and then I'll finish on some examples. But we've been asking these particular questions. I'm not going to read them out, but what we've concluded is that we need a much stronger body of evidence, particularly from Japan. A lot of our models around this, around environmental design for people living with cognitive impairments, for example, tend to be very European-centric. And I think we need to look at Japan in some detail and look at that comparison a bit more. We also need to do a lot more on co-production. And I think this is an exciting area which we've just heard about in relation to Japan. But we need to be inclusive of people with dementia. They're as diverse a group as the aging population itself. And co-production with people with dementia is really important. They're equal citizens with equal rights. And so I think these are some of the messages that can be taken to the meeting, the G7 meeting, in terms of where we're going, and also to the UK-Japan parliamentary groups that get together. Dementia was featured in the parliamentary group here in the UK, I think in 2017. I think we need to revisit that again and really lobby for more collaborations in this area. So if I could have the next slide, these are two examples. This one in the UK that we visited to have a look at what was happening. This is a residential feature. And then in Japan, in the next slide, You can see some of the one of the places we visited there in Setagaya, and learned a great deal from the Japanese context, particularly in designing environments. So thank you very much. I'm very happy to take questions on anything, and I'm sure Alison, if she is on the call, would also like to take questions. So thank you very much. The last slide will show our website and Twitter feed, and please do get in touch with us to hear more about the Social Behaviour and Design Research Programme or the Healthy Aging Challenge itself. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Judith. And I think that just showed again how, and I think we know this, but how healthy aging really touches all aspects, of life, from the environment to housing to the leisure industry. So thanks everyone so much for your presentations. We've already got a few questions in the Q&A, but if you have a burning question, do add it to there. I think, and a couple of you have already sort of touched on this, the upcoming G7 summit in Japan in May. I guess sort of a question to all of you really, what do you think are some opportunities in terms of getting healthy aging, or sort of aging in general, onto the agenda, and where are some key sort of learning points? So if you want to raise your hand, or I can go one by one. Judith?
Yes, thank you. Just one comment on that. I think it's really important to feed into other agendas as well. So linking some of this with climate change, with the need to raise productivity and those economic aspects. I think it's making sure that aging is really centre stage in those arguments as well. I think that's when people will sit up and really take the agenda seriously. So I think there's some work there to really bring that to the fore in these meetings.
Thank you. And Professor Matsuoka, I see you've unmuted yourself. Did you want to come in?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It was each presentation was very interesting for me, and especially the Judith Phillips presentation. In the UK, the joint of the researchers and firms and the practitioners is making a very big network for the successful aging, or the very good very good successful aging, and that is it's a very difficulty in Japan to make a co-production among the research field and the farm field from my point of view. So it was very impressive for me. And you said co-production. You used the word of co-production several times. What I want to ask about the co-production. How do you define the word of co-production? It's varies from the viewpoint of the social worker and the practitioners and the researchers. They use the several meaning. They have the several meaning by the co-production. So may I ask about this point? It's okay.
Judith, did you want to come in on that?
Thank you. Thanks. I mean, it's a fascinating field, I think, because a lot of people use co-production, but they're not really co-producing. They're just enabling people to participate. So I think we can range right the way from just user participation, right the way up to true co-design, co-production, where if you take older people and practitioners, involving them right from the start in designing research questions, or where they want the impact to be, what the outcomes should be. And I think it's that engagement right from the beginning is really important, and to take people with you all the way through all the steps that you go through. Very often we dip in and dip out to our communities of older people or with practitioners. We bring them in at certain stages, whereas I think with co-production, it starts very much at the beginning, thinking about people center stage, being very person focused in this. I think one of the things that we're learning from the Healthy Aging Challenge is that we're taking co-production to another level by bringing business into this equation as well. So businesses are actually co-producing their services with older people, and this is quite different for many businesses. They're struggling with it, and we're facilitating that as researchers. So I think there's some very interesting messages coming out of our projects around this, and we can keep you posted on that, because I think that's one of the areas we need to look at in terms of what's happening in Japan too.
Yes.
Thank you. I'd love to bring
Yeah, thank you very much.
thanks. I'd love to bring Taichi-san in on the question of G7 as well.
Okay, thank you. I think first of all, I took slightly the conversation between the Matsuoka sensei and the Judith, and I think yes, I agree with the Matsuoka sensei that your initiative is so fascinating and interesting, because I think the people come to know that naturally that due to the change of the structure of the market where they are aging, the elderly people will have the kind of purchasing power and they become the majority of the market, but business does not change their mind so easily. So they are not thinking about the elderly is a kind of a blue ocean for them to explore their investment. But I think the governmental initiative by UK is quite interesting to change to the mind of the these business people toward how what we can do, what they can do to have their better or happier life for the elderly people. So I think it's quite interesting. And another thing I want to mention about the G7 that initially that the ladies has raised. My understanding of the G7 summit, if we were to raise the issue of the aging to the G7 summit, in the Japan's context, and the aging is a kind of a kind of old problem. What we are now more concerned about the declining birth rate rather than how to deal with the aging population. So maybe we can. Outside of Japan, like the United Kingdom, people would like to kind of give the impression about the aging society in Japan, how it is perceived by your country's people, and what is there might be some problems but there might be some good points, and let us realize what you are thinking about our aging society as it is now, and our challenges from from now, and in that context, the index that the Arun-san has introduced and initiated by the ILC-UK is a good, I think, the good material to let us aware about how we are, how our aging society is now kind of graded. Japanese people like the international comparison, how we are compared with the other countries. Anyway, so yes, that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think you've flagged there, of course, I mean, the difference between sort of aging and declining population, but I think also a point, and it's come through in a couple of questions on the Q&A as well, as that, of course, healthy aging doesn't just affect us at the end of our lives, but is a process sort of throughout. Do any of you want to come in on that kind of question of, how can we make sure that we don't think of healthy aging as an afterthought, but it's actually a sort of thing that we hope to have throughout our lives? There was another question as well, which, if any of you want to comment on, around things like the role of employers, and of course, workforce strategies that, again, have a really big impact on healthy aging. Professor Matsuoka, you're unmuted. I don't know if you wanted to come in. Okay, in that case, I guess
Yeah.
I'll just read out a comment from someone on the Q&A that kind of relates to this. So Meb Surimtula from Canada, we need to have a discussion around the 45 to 75-year-old versus 75 plus only, he says. And how do we engage this group so they live a more engaged and purposeful life than perhaps their parents or grandparents? And he makes a point about, let's talk about the opportunities of longevity versus just the challenges of aging. Work, living, finances, learning, and giving back in a 100-year life will look very different than what past generations went through. Thanks, Mebs. I think that definitely runs true with the conversation we've had today. We have one question I would like to perhaps ask to our Japanese colleagues. Aaron showed the index earlier, and I think what was very striking there was the 4-year difference in healthy life expectancy, so 4 extra years of health, and perhaps a big and very open question, but it would be great to hear your thoughts on what you think might be going on there, what could be contributing to that, Dr. Ono and Professor Matsuoka.
Yes, about the you're asking about the health life expectancy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yes. Then I think the one of the I think the participation for the engagement to the society, like the through working, might be a little bit different from the other countries. And people, according to some data, that the Japanese elderly tend to continue to work more compared to the colleagues with the same age, same bracket of age of the same generation, and they find the meaning of working as a kind of fulfillment of life rather than the method for earning money. So that tendency is similar, can be seen both the female and male. It might be one of the cause of the life expectancy in Japan, but I'm not sure about the maybe I can find some other kind of medical aspect like the access to healthcare or a dietary habit, etc. But I'm not sure about that aspect as well. But so I think the Matsuoka Sensei might have another point for the how we can how about the healthy life expectancy about in Japan. Thank you. That's my comment.
Yes. The difference of the health expectancy and the life expectancy is quite big. For instance, 9 years for male and 12 years for female. So that we must get some support from the public or neighborhood, and there is some, as Ono Sensei said, we have the tendency, the elderly people wants to work longer. The cause is one of the causes the pension level is not so high. It's different from where they have been working, so it's quite different. So the reason why they want to work longer is they depend on where they have been working. So they want to keep work longer, and from the viewpoint of the government policy, they want the elderly people to work longer and longer to support the whole society, because we are suffering from a big decreasing of the birth rate in Japan. Yes, I think that is the whole picture in Japan.
That's really interesting. Thanks. And on that kind of work front, when I was in Japan over the summer, I was really struck by, so we were doing some field work on quite a different topic, but speaking to lots of people.
Yeah.
And I was struck by how many people said they'd retired but they were actually still working. So it clearly wasn't considered full work, but people might have retired from a city job and returned to their family home and then worked as, you know, as a farmer essentially, but that was just considered, oh yeah, I do that about 6 hours a day. But so that actually a lot of people do continue working, and sometimes not necessarily the formal sector as well. And one other bit that came up a fair bit with people that we were interviewing who were in their 60s, 70s, 80s is how much people were volunteering or working in schools or getting engaged in their community. And I don't know if for some of our listeners, either of you want to talk a little bit about this sort of concept of silver resource centres. If not, I can sort of share my very outside sort of perspective where people who have retired kind of come through and get engaged in different projects, from working in the community or sort of building or volunteering, and it felt like a really interesting initiative that seemed to capture lots of people.
Yes, and your Silver Resource Center, you mean? Okay,
Yes.
actually, my mother is a vice president of the Silver Resource Center
Oh, okay.
of the city where she's living in, actually. And actually, it gives her the kind of actually she my father has passed away quite a long more than 10 years ago, and she lives alone, and it provides her a meaning of life, meaning of kind of stay engaged with and finding a friend. And of course some troubles happens during such a practice, but it it really is an enjoyable one. And yes, she engages, her notebook, scheduled notebook is filled with appointments. Thank you.
That's great. And I think absolutely, I mean, activity both contributes to productivity, but also, as you say, that purpose, that meaning, that social connection. Professor Matsuoka, there are a couple of questions in the Q&A as well that relate sort of directly to some of the initiatives you were talking about. And one of them picks up on volunteering, really, and understanding a bit more about. So one of the participants here mentioned some barriers that people in the UK might face to volunteering. What do you think in the sort of Japanese context? Are there some particular barriers that might stop people from volunteering if they want to, or is it quite easy?
Are you asking about the condition of the volunteering in Japan? That's right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. In terms of the volunteer, they always say, oh, it's so difficult. But we are very polite and very eager to be strict on the work as a volunteer. We must go at least once a week or at least 2 hours a day. So they make a rule for the volunteering. So they think the volunteering is not easy, not joyful, but very difficult to continue. So that so many persons say the volunteering is very difficult to keep up with. So, but I saw the very nice scene in Okinawa Prefecture. They are enjoying the park golf. It's a kind of a very easy golf, and they have a very nice friend enjoying the park golf, and they are after golf they were enjoying the drinking with the liquor and the food, and they have a very good friendship all together. But someday, so someone said, why don't we something good to contribute to the society? Oh, it's a good idea. So then we let's start the volunteering after drinking and enjoying the dinner. And they start the volunteering, and they focus on the only one theme. The theme was their support some detail, support some very small works. For instance, the gardening in the garden and cleaning and the garbage. Ono sensei, how do we call the gomiyashiki? Garbage house?
Yeah, you know,
Garbage house.
yeah, kind of a self-neglected house filled with garbages.
House filled with garbages. There is
Yes,
quite a lot
self-neglected
house filled with garbage. So they start the clean up the house with garbage. So they enjoy the volunteer work with good friends. So if we change the mind for the volunteering very enjoyable thing, so the volunteering will be a good and enjoyable things. So that is our elderly people's image for the volunteering.
Thank you.
Can I explain it? Okay. Yeah.
Yes, very well. Thank you. There is one question here looking at gender, and I guess if we're looking at the last half to a century in which both Japan and the UK have been aging, there's also been very big changes, of course, in terms of gender and working and all these sorts of things. I don't know if anyone would like to comment, perhaps you, Aaron, as well, on how you think that has affected things and how actually these two trends sort of come together.
May I?
Yes, of course. Go ahead, Taichi.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I think
Yes,
it used to be the gender role about the care burden for the elderly in the household. It used to be the role of the daughter-in-law, the wife of the first son is supposed to take care of the elderly. It was before the introduction of long-term care insurance. Now, 20 years after long-term care insurance has been introduced, the role of the daughter-in-law has kind of eased a lot. But instead, the current primary caregiver is wife. Actually, I mean the husband who gets senile or who gets demented. Wife is the first family carer, and the second is the daughter, and the real daughter in the second one, and followed by husband. Then comes the son. Actually, and some of these are younger generation, daughter or son generation, they have to take care of their children as well. So they are kind of strapped with a double or dual care burdens to take care of their parents as well as take care of their children. Yeah, that issue comes to be paid significant attention in Japan, I think. Yes, I just I just wanted to some of the kind of issue that is currently debated in Japan. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith.
It's also an issue, of course, in the UK in the same way. I think gender is really so important in aging, and I've heard it said aging is all about gender and it's all about women, which I wouldn't necessarily totally agree with, but I think that gender, we do need to look at through the lens of gender in relation to all these policies and practices that go on. And I think one of the things, looking at, there was a question you mentioned, you asked earlier on about the role of employers and the workforce. And I think we really do need to look at gender there, particularly people who are juggling these roles of caring for an older person and also working. We don't have so much in terms of the sandwich generation in the UK, the looking after children as well as older parents. I don't think it's as much as Japan, but the issue of juggling work and family life, particularly now given the crisis that we have in living standards and so forth in the UK is a real issue, and the gender lens is more than ever really important in this equation. I think we can learn a lot from Japan and vice versa, probably.
Thank you. And
Aaron,
Aaron,
yeah, sorry, I was trying to find my raising my hand function and I couldn't. I've sort of been in the background responding to a few messages as well. So apologies for the silence on my behalf, but I thought I could just quickly come in to talk about the gender bit and then just a little bit about the index, if that's okay. So I think the point around gender, I think, yeah, absolutely, like what everyone else has said, really important to take a close look at that. And I think from the global perspective, we're in a good position in that lots of global databases do look at gender, so we can actually compare. So I think that's great. I would be particularly interested to look at the changes in health and work of women over time, especially in the future when we're thinking about the fact that older women generally spend more time in poor health, the impact that that's going to have for their work, especially as the workforce, the female workforce is increasing. That will be quite interesting. And I also wanted to make a point around the index and the fact that we're looking at working life expectancy. It's quite an interesting metric because it doesn't tell you the quality of the work. So actually what you find is in developing countries, they actually have a higher working life expectancy, but this is often driven by women working for more years than men, and also in poor quality work. So it would be quite interesting to see what the trends look like for women specifically, and for men as well, the gendered perspective. To understand how that's changing and how people's health is changing in relation to work as well.
Thank you. And I realize we are coming up to time, so we probably won't be able to answer all questions left, but I just wanted to say thank you so much for all of you for joining us today. I think we've covered a lot of ground. We've tried to solve all of aging across all of the UK and all of Japan, but it's been a really, really interesting discussion. I hope you as speakers, but also everyone who's been joining us has taken something away. I've seen in the Q&A quite a few questions for a bit more background and links and reports and everything. So I think we'll check with all the panelists to see what they're happy to share. We'll probably be putting these slides up after the session so we can share that with everyone as well. A big thank you to Grips for joining us on this webinar. Thanks for everyone who's been supporting our index work as well. And we'll be publishing that as an online tool that you can use yourself in May. And as obviously we've mentioned, we are hoping to do something alongside the G7 in May in Japan. So we'll share our plans and are very keen to collaborate with anyone else who is doing anything there. So I think all that's left to say is thanks so much, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.